Coming up next are the two important elements of a proposal writing, that are resources and activities. Now, while doing this, in this section, we basically describe how will you go about implementing your program. So this is basically a step-by-step approach of designing and noting down the major activities and the resources that are going to be mobilized in the project. Now, resources and activities should logically tie. There should be a logical framework into the desired results. Now, I'll be discussing this in detail more in the monitoring and evaluation section. But just for the record, an important thing which is needed to be noted is that resources and activities are sometimes called or referred to as inputs. Now, when we talk about the logical framework basically clarifies what are the objectives of the project or the program, and how the objectives are linked with the activities and the resources that you are going to be using for your project. So there should be a causal link between the two. And for this purpose, you would also need to identify some performance indicators and what are the risks associated at each stage. You may also need to identify some of the assumptions that are being taken into account. The logical framework is also a tool for engaging partners in clarifying objectives and designing activities. Now, when we discuss this tool and how can you develop it, I'll be showing you some examples as well in the monitoring and evaluation section. But this tool is basically more relevant to be used as a progress review and correction. Now, this is a small snapshot or an example of a logical tie or the logical framework, where you will have some input. As I said, that they are basically the resources and activities. So what are the resources and activities that you will be mobilizing through some intervention process, through which you will be achieving some outputs, and those outputs will be leading to outcome, and the outcomes will have an impact on a society or a community. So if we just have a look at this small example, that for example, increasing funding for legal education. Now, this is one of the inputs. Now, what is the process? Develop course material and curriculum. Now, through this process, you are going to develop some curriculum and some training material. So what will be the output of this? More lawyers will be trained. So number of course graduates. Outcome, more poor defendants are represented in court. Rate of legal representation will be enhanced here. And what is the impact? So equal access to justice. The courts are perceived as fair and equitable by all. So this is a small logical framework which is being started from this input up to this impact, and they are all connected with each other. So there should be a logical explanation of each step that you are taking and all the resources that you will be utilizing. Now, when we say resources, what do we mean by resources? The resources would include the human, financial, organizational, and community resources that the program will require. You need to be very specific about the number of staff the volunteers who will work on the project and their relevant expertise and qualifications. Usually, the funders ask you to send the CVs or the resumes of the key personnel involved. So here you will actually be making a point that you have the relevant competencies available. You would also need to provide some other resources if they are available there at your disposal. For example, the board members who can mentor individuals and groups in the community who can volunteer. Do you have access to any research libraries, for example, or other equipment that can be used? So the purpose is that you are going to convince the funders that you have the right people, the right partners, and the right other non-human resources available at the table. Now when we say activities, so the activities should be very specific. You would need to create a step-by-step work plan. And by doing this, you will also be explaining why each activity was selected. Now, let me show you an example of this. Now, this is one of the proposals that I have prepared for a project of USAID funding. Now, here I've listed down few activities. This one. Okay. And if you can see, I have divided them into a logical framework: planning and design, management of workshops / meetings, delivery, and evaluation of the workshops. Now these are the 4 major activities that will take place, but under each major activity there are some subsections, sub-activities that will take place. So for example, under the planning and designing, we'll be setting up some goals and objectives for the event. We'll be also deciding about the scope of the event, creating agenda, scheduling the event, their timings, their venues. These are the sub-steps that we need to take in order to fulfill the activity number 1, planning and designing. And as I said, you would need to provide some kind of description or an explanation of why that activity is important. So here is that description. And I've also put some outputs or deliverables that can be achieved through this activity. Right? Now the indicator bit, I'll be discussing this in detail when I go to monitoring and evaluation. So I'll be covering this, so just leave this point for a moment. Now this is activity number 2, management of workshops, meetings. So what I'm going to do first is organize required resources and logistics for the event, hiring, orienting and training of required staff, selection and appropriate venue, secure, easily accessible for each event, assigning duties and responsibilities, etc. And these are all the list of sub-activities. Same is the case with the delivery and workshop, as well as the last one, the evaluation of workshops meetings. Okay. Let me show you another example. Now this is a different project and a different proposal, and I've listed down the activities in a different format here. So I've mentioned the activities here with the number of days that will be consumed by that particular activity and the tentative dates as well. So there is a logical order in each activity which will lead to some other activities. So the first thing is the project orientation. Now this is basically a program for training a number of students about the political awareness. So the first thing that we have decided is the project orientation, then the selection of the students, the training delivery, and these are the different topics, and these are some other activities that have been identified, and we think that it will be implemented. Now these are the two examples. So as I said, create a step-by-step work plan. So there was a clear link of each activity. Now you cannot, for example, you cannot conduct an orientation session in the middle of your project. Obviously, when you hire the trainees, so the first interaction, when you call them for the first interaction, that makes sense that orientation should be at that stage. So there should be a sensible, logical order between the activities. You need to be specifically explaining that who is responsible for what kind of activities, who is responsible, for example, for taking care of the finances, what are the program outcomes, who will report. So all these things should be clearly mentioned there. Now, remember that you have to be very realistic. You need to be very reasonable when you are identifying the scope of activities that can be conducted. So the timelines that you are actually suggesting, that should be realistic and achievable with having reasonable resources in hand. And if the project is a long-term project, so you can break it down into different phases and also indicate how long each phase will take. So this is basically an important area that you need to work on, and probably you would also need to do some research on that, what sort of activities should be included in different projects. Now please remember that getting into partnership with some other social sector organization is basically a plus point, and I'm emphasizing on this point right from the start. So the funders often favor proposals that include some degree of collaboration between or among groups or organizations with complementary or synergetic characteristics. But if you are going into collaboration with some organization, you would need to describe what are your roles and what are the roles of your partners, and why are you going into collaboration with that particular partner. So you also have to back up that partnership. That can be in the form of that you can say that they are bringing some key skills to the table that you are lacking in. They have some past experience in that particular area, competencies available. So all these things can be written down there. And also you need to be sure that while you are bringing some partner to the table, you need to work out the details of arrangements. Like what will be your responsibilities, what will be the responsibilities of your partner. So for example, some organizations, when they bring partnership to the table, what they do, that some organizations are responsible for the project designing, the project evaluation, and they co-partner with someone for different other activities. For example, the project implementation phase. So they co-partner with someone and they give them the implementation side, that okay, you are the implementing partners and we will be the designers and we will also evaluate the outcomes. Okay, so you need to be specific about who will be responsible for what and the resources each group will contribute. Alright, so this was basically the next element that should have been there on the proposal. Now when we come back in the next video, I'll be discussing about the budget and how can you make an effective budget. Alright, so stay tuned. Thank you.